Is it a struggle? Yes, we have to realize our strengths and our weaknesses. Hi, and welcome back to Why Not? And I'm your host, Janice. We're here interviewing inspiring guests on inspirational topics. Our goal is to help others to reach their goals by providing inspirational information to get you where you need to go. Now, today our topic is unfortunately not the happiest. It's on surviving loss. During the past couple of years, obviously with COVID, people have experienced loss, but people experience loss without COVID, losing a spouse, a child. The guest we have today is Chanel Rosebud. She is an entrepreneur. She's also a relationship and self-love expert. But today, right now, we're going to do two parts with her. We're going to talk to her about surviving loss. She lost her husband during the last couple years and how she's overcome that. And this way we can inspire others if they've gone through it or going through it, how they can recover and lean on God for help and strength, encouragement. Welcome to the show, Chanel. How are you?
I am well, and thank you for having me today, Janice.
Thank you for being a guest. I want to talk a little bit about you first before we get into the loss. Now, how long were you married to your husband?
My husband and I were married 14 years, and we were together over 20 plus years.
Wow,
We have a 28-year-old daughter. She will actually be 29. So we have been together a long time.
long time, definitely a long time. And was it like high school sweethearts? Because you don't look that old and you said 29 years being together.
Yes, he was. I was 17 years old when I met him, and he is 5.5 years older than I am. But yeah, so we've known each other the majority of my life.
So basically, you lost your first true and only love.
Yes.
I couldn't imagine that massive loss. Now, do you want to get into what happened in the last couple of years? Now, you had a strong marriage
Yes,
and you live in Texas. And
correct.
how was your marriage before this, a couple of years before this? How were you doing?
So my husband and I, we had a marriage that was one that you can consider true love. And with that being said, we had our ups and we had our downs in marriage. Raising our child and things like that. We had differences, of course.
Right.
And my husband was working one day and he wasn't feeling well. He got shortness of breath. Excuse me. He had shortness of breath. And
Okay.
he went to the hospital and they told him that they diagnosed him with cardiomyopathy.
Okay. Now, what
So
is that exactly?
cardiomyopathy is an enlarged heart,
Oh,
and he had a family history of it. So it was genetic for him.
oh, so it's genetics, like mom, dad on his dad's side or mom's side.
Yes, his mother's side of the family, his grandfather.
Okay.
Yes. So he had a pacemaker defibrillator put in, and he was approximately 38 years old at the time. So
Wow. So 38 years old and having to get a pacemaker that soon. I mean, no one's even thinking about that. I mean,
yes,
the most we're thinking about heart is a Valentine's Day card heart, not having to go get a pacemaker for your heart at 38.
at 38 years old.
Wow.
And so that's when our lives really started to change because now we were, facing diets, of course, exercise, lifestyle changes, a lot of different things. And it was trying. It was very trying. It was scary.
Hmm.
And me being the one who had the strongest relationship with the Lord,
Okay.
um, I was the prayer warrior, caregiver and things like that. Excuse me.
Oh, take
And
some
so
more too.
it made it really, really it was trying for me. I work full time, a lot of doctors of visits and things like that. So this went on this journey of him going to sleep and me waking up and making sure he was okay throughout the night. A lot of sleepless nights, and things like that. That went on for almost 9.5 years.
Okay.
And it got to a point to where his EF, which is his injection fraction within his heart, it went down. So for the normal human being, it's 65%, I believe, or
Right.
more or higher. And for him, it got all the way down to
Get down to what?
3%.
Whoa, shoot. 3%.
3%.
That's barely on the chart level. I mean, yeah.
Yes. So he had to get prepped and get on the list for a heart transplant and,
Oh
you
my.
know, get worked up. And there was a lot of different things with that. And needless to say, he did have to go in and have a heart transplant. We stayed in the hospital 33 days to be
Okay.
exact.
Now let's hold on a second here. I want to recap something. So he was 38 when he needed a pacemaker. Or not, a pacemaker, correct.
Correct.
And that definitely changed your lifestyle. So as a couple and a marriage bond, your spouse has a problem or you have a problem, you work together and you work together. You change your diets, everything to make sure that spouse is going to survive and the marriage is going to survive.
Correct. But it was a challenge for me,
Okay.
to be honest, because I was also young and I loved my carbs and I love different foods and things like that.
Right.
We had to change, no salt. You couldn't add anything to the food, just herbs and things that did not have that were salt free. So it was a struggle, to be honest.
Hmm.
But I also made sure though that I learned how to cook without it. So I am a cook, but just that's a part of my love language. And so I learned how to cook without using the heavy salts and seasonings and things like that. And it really helped, throughout the years, until of course, and continued to be like that until he transitioned. So yes, I
So you
had to,
did all that, and your husband too, trying to control, asking God for help. We need help to control the desires for carbs and food. But then 9 years later, tragic happened. He had to get a transplant.
yes,
Wow. Okay.
yes. So with the transplant, I'm going to say this: the Lord showed me that it would be myself, the Lord, and my husband through this journey, through this process.
Right.
So as I acknowledged and heard what the Lord had presented to me, I knew that it was going to be okay because He had let me know that He would be there with us through this process.
Never leave you, forsake you.
Yes. And
Mhm.
so my husband ended up having a call. He got the call going into Mother's Day, May 13th of 2018.
Okay.
So he actually received a new heart, accepted the heart within like 3 hours. He only had like a 3.5 hour surgery.
Hmm.
And he made it through the heart transplant.
Well, now even with the heart transplant or any transplant, I mean, it's a sacrifice. Either someone's passed away or someone's sacrificed and I'm still alive, but you could have one of my kidneys. So that's even a blessing from God to actually be able to receive a transplant because a lot of the body rejects other people's, DNA and blood. So that's a blessing. And then there's also a loss for some people because someone died to have your husband survive.
Absolutely.
And it only took 3 hours. Wow, that's amazing. Was the transplant something local? I know I had an uncle that they actually diverted the plane. He was in the air to get him to Atlanta to get him for his transplant because they actually got it while he was traveling.
Great question. So for the transplant for my husband, he is actually in one of the top states that do it here. So
Okay.
Dallas, UT Southwestern is one of the hospitals that do. They're one of the major transplant hospitals
Wow.
in the
Okay.
world. So
That was
he
a
was
blessing in itself, being
yes,
right there. Okay.
yes. hmm And so after the transplant, he did go through, he did really well for like the first 90 days.
Hmm.
Very, very well. And then he started to have rejection and infection.
Oh, wow.
So he did have to go through a lot of different things. The depths of this transplant procedure and then, the post care is one that I wish no one would have to deal with or go through. But it educated me enough to know how serious it really and truly is, to help or to see someone fight for their life and the boundaries that you have to go through, even the physicians and everyone, to try to try to continue to have life,
Right.
a second chance at life. And so my husband, he actually succumbed to a failed heart transplant June 11th of 2021. He was 50 years old
Hmm.
and I was 45. It'll be 2 years to be exact this June 11th of 2023.
Now he had the transplant in 2018, correct?
Correct.
So he at least lived with the heart for 3 years, but it was a battle the whole time. So it wasn't like you got the heart transplant and you're back to work on Monday, doing whatever you do.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, how was his fate during this time? Were you told about how he was going or handling the emotions with God and the feelings of what he was doing? How was he with God?
Absolutely. So in the beginning, he was very, very, very humble and grateful and blessed, and he continued to be. But the fight for his life, and to continue to have he was fighting for longevity with the heart.
Right.
So one of the things I will always say is that mental health is very, very important. It's
Mhm.
something that, a lot of times they don't really honestly, and when I say they, I'm saying a lot of providers and things like that won't go through the depths of the post care when
Right.
it comes to mental health because they're really just trying to help you get that second chance of life,
Right. They worry
which is,
about the physical and not
yes,
the mental part. And you need
yes.
the mental part to make sure you're ensuring yourself the strength and courage is mentally to help the physical.
Absolutely. And that's a part of the process of being mentally stable to be able to even have the transplant.
Hmm.
But again, on the post side of that, it is very important for the caregivers and the ones that are truly there outside of their care with their physicians and everything to help them with their esteem, their self esteem, their confidence, all of those things because they literally
Absolutely.
transform. They're no longer the same person. And I always tell people I lost my husband twice. And
Okay.
I say that because when he had the transplant, he
Hmm.
literally died then
Hmm.
and was given a second chance with someone else's heart.
Right. Because they actually stop your heart and take it out. Even though they may have blood flowing, they actually take it out and you are technically dead because your heart
Yes,
is beating. Correct.
correct. And so when he came back to me, he was a new person.
Hmm.
And he
Absolutely.
was a person that I had to love and assure, that he was going to get through this. We would get through this and also embrace the newness that was a gift of having a second chance of life.
Right. That
And
does.
I did all of that. I was able to sustain and get through because of the grace of God. Through prayer, and I had a few very strong, supportive friends in ministry, best friends and things like that to help me along the way. I suggest counseling, when it comes to these life changing events, because these are major life changing events. And so anyone individually and as a couple need to do their own self work, their own counseling, and reassure that they're getting the care that they need for themselves. Because that's one thing for sure. Um, your husband or your wife or whoever, your child, whoever it is that is close to you that may endure these things, the caregiver has to make sure that they're getting the proper care for themselves because if you are not right and you are not, doing your reflections and processing these things,
Right.
it can take a toll on you as well.
Right, it absolutely can. My husband had a quintuple bypass December of 2020. And even that, just having to take care of him at home, and they crack your chest open, and
Yes.
the pain in him not being able to move, and it's like, well, you can't take care of your job, you're having to take care of them, and that need and bond. And even for my husband, that second chance in life, that it was caught before something horrible happened, and it puts a whole straight on the family, and you don't have a lot of support. Unfortunately, the only support you have is turning to God, because unfortunately people are people. When things happen, they have their own lives too.
Right. Correct.
Right. And then doctors are more worried about, okay, well, we dealt with that. They don't care about the mental part of, hey, I just went through trauma. That's almost PTSD.
It is PTSD.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
For both the family and the person receiving um, the treatment.
Yes.
Wow. Now, how were you? And I know, like, even you had your daughter, even though she was adult, but how was that becoming a changing role? I assume, and I make an assumption, you met your husband when you were younger, your one love. He was probably more the head of the family. You looked up to him. He took care of things. And even though it was a joint as being a couple, but sometimes the man takes the head of the role of the household. But now you are everything to everyone. How was that for you?
So, my husband and I, when we were younger, there were, there were several years that we went our own separate ways. We weren't married at the time or any of that.
Mhm.
And so I've had time to be a single parent, not one single meaning not in the household.
Mhm.
Um, at one point in my life. And so I knew that I always made sure that I would be able to take care of myself and my child with or without. And in a positive way, not in a negative way, but just that was something that was always in me. Your spouse is a blessing,
Right.
and it adds to your life, right? And
Right.
so, thank God I've had those experiences for me to be able to maintain and continue on. Um, I've always been one strong woman, especially when it comes to parenting. I only have one child. And so I try to pour as much as I can into her because I know you only have one shot. I don't have two and three and four children. I have one time, right?
Mhm. Right.
And so I pour love, I pour knowledge, and everything else into her. And we have a very close bond. We always have, even
Right.
with her father, with us. And so for me, it's sad a little. I'm saddened by it, but we help each other, we encourage each other, we support each other, we show up for one another. And so those are the things that helps us to get through. And God is my foundation, our foundation. And so she watches me. She's married herself. And so, I'm grateful and blessed for that. She has a husband of her own, and so, we set the example. We set it, and so I encourage them, and I'm there to root them on. And I'm just embracing this newness. It's very hard. It's a new adjustment for my life.
I'm
I've
sure.
I've never been by myself. I've always had. We had our child raising her, and then we had each other. So now I'm almost 47, and I'm like, oh my goodness, my whole entire world is completely changed. It's different, you know. So
But
how
God
do I
prepared
make
you.
it? Yes.
Yes, God
So
prepared
how
you
do
in those times that you were single, and getting you stronger and strength through the times of helping your husband. He gave you the strength and prepared you.
he did? He truly did, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that he actually knew that he didn't have long. He knew it. And so towards the end, he started to talk to me, like literally have these real deep, heavy, hard conversations. And I was in denial,
Hmm.
because I stood on faith the whole way through.
Hmm.
And God was showing me some things also. So there were some red flags, and I'm like, Lord, no, you know. But my husband, he worried about making sure that we were okay. He just told me that he wants me to persevere. He wants me to do well in life and that he's there for me. But as
Mm.
he was speaking to me and saying these things, he was here.
Okay.
I
Do
didn't
you recommend?
understand what he meant.
Okay. Do you think those conversations are necessary? Was it helpful for you? Although you say you're in denial.
I was
Like,
in denial and it was very helpful.
okay.
It was very helpful because he left me words of strength and encouragement. And my husband, he actually lived his life till his last breath. He lived.
Wow.
He chose to live.
Okay.
And that was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. I always say my husband is one of the strongest men, if not the strongest man I know in my life, that I've ever come across.
Now, how
Because
was he in those last 3 years then, from the transplant to the end?
he lived life. I mean,
Right.
he would go in and out of the hospital. He had a lot of procedures,
Oh, wow.
but outside of that, he lived his life. We would go to watch games. We would do a lot. Excuse me. Excuse me. A lot of different things we would do.
Okay.
He stayed active. We stayed doing, family trips, and I mean, he just lived his life. And
Mm.
that's what I mean. He chose not to be in the hot. He would go through mood swings and cry. He had his moments, but ultimately he got up and said, "Come on, let's go and live life."
Now, you said he started talking to you near the end. So
Yes.
you felt that he knew it was time. What was going on in his body? Was it just more rejections? The doctors were like, we can't do anything?
Great question. My husband had the vaccination.
Oh,
He did. He had the vaccination January 3rd, 31st, and he had the second one March the 1st.
mm,
And he started to have all these different like all these different things started happening. His face started to discolorate. So they thought they told him that there was a possibility it was sunburn, and he's like, "This is not sunburn. It's not
mm,
peeling or anything." And it was like it started from up here all the way down. It was like a
wow.
grayish color.
Hmm.
And then he just started having pain and things like that, and they were trying to figure out what was causing it. With a heart transplant, you're not supposed to feel if you're having a heart attack. He started to feel mild heart attacks.
Wow.
So that started in mid-May, and he went into the hospital for like a week. And when he was released, they told him that he did his levels showed that he did have a heart attack. So he
Mm.
started having many ones, and they just kept creeping up on him and things like that. And June 11th was the day that evening, we went out, we had a nice time, enjoyed ourselves. And that evening, he had a heart attack.
Wow.
And, so with that being said, very strong man. I
Mhm.
grieve. I grieve all the time.
And you were with him when he passed away.
I was. I was. I was. And one of the things he always said was that he wanted to be with me and he wanted to be home. He didn't want to be in a hospital. He didn't want to be, to where he couldn't fend for himself or any of that. He wanted to be home. And I said, it's funny how when you manifest things, when you speak with the words that you speak out of your mouth truly hold so much weight. And for me to sit and think and reflect on everything that was spoken that he ever spoke to me,
Hmm.
it actually happened just how he asked really wanted it to be.
Wanted to be. Mm.
Hmm. And so though I was I was traumatized. I was, I was in shock for a bit, for probably about maybe the first 6.5, 7 months,
Hmm.
before I even could really process that it was real.
Okay.
So yeah, so that is basically, what it is to actually survive after loss is getting up, making the decision to live, to not merely just to not merely just survive,
Hmm.
and I look at life so much more as life as a gift. And to see someone that you love smile and laugh and you're having fun, and then within hours they're just a memory, is very, very, very difficult. Very difficult. But I would encourage those that are listening to understand that you are a gift as well. And while you are still here, while we are still here, we're here on purpose.
Right.
We are
Absolutely.
all here on purpose. And so, because I know that, and because I have a strong relationship with the Lord, I had to get up even when I didn't want to.
Mm.
I had to encourage myself. I had to hear the Lord, the Holy Spirit say, get up. There was times in the first few maybe months that I would hear my husband's voice saying, get up, Chanel, get
Wow.
up. And I am here standing on God's glory and grace and favor because I listen and I know that if I get up, my husband is living also through me.
Mm.
And I am continuing a legacy.
Right. Wow. Because through that pain and suffering of losing your husband and the words of encouragement he gave you, preparing you, God preparing you, you were able to do more and get up and still keep living, but still keep loving and remembering and treasuring the love you had with him.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. If you can, we only have a few more minutes left. We're down to 3 minutes. You gave us some advice on what to do if you have that loss of love. Um, were there any like Bible verses that helped you or something that you knew from God besides hearing your husband's voice telling you to get up that you clung to and you stayed on?
There's a song that came to me in my spirit, and it was actually the day of my husband's services. And
Mm,
it hit me so hard in my spirit, and it was all of the glory belongs to you. And in that, I want to say that we have to turn everything over to God. When we have trials and tribulations, we have to know that God is in control. He is in control of life and death, right? And so, as long as we know that, you can only change the things within your own ability. Those things that we do not have control over, they belong to the Lord.
right.
And so, for me, it's, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not into your own understanding.
Understanding. Absolutely. Well, thank you for that wonderful advice. Thank you for sharing with us. We're out of time, but we're actually going to talk to you with another show about how, after survival through this, you flourish and thrive, and God let you into being an entrepreneur and a podcast, and you do relationship and self love coaching. You've written books also. So, our next show with you, we're going to talk about that and discuss that and your empowerment through God through all the tragedies. I want to thank you. Our guest is Chanel Budd. Our topic was surviving loss. She lost her husband. And thank you very much for being on the show. We appreciate you. And if anyone has any questions, you can contact us. We have information. Watch us on YouTube and Facebook. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you very much. And thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good night.